Good morning, welcome to Duck River Homestead. This morning I'm going to be planting out some of our garden, so I figured I'd take you along with me. So yes, if you're wondering, is this chick in her bathrobe? I am. It's cold this morning, it's like 40 degrees. So I'm going to start with my bathrobe, and as I warm up, the layers will shed. Typically, I get my head right. I spend some time just doing some quiet time before I get to working. And then I started weeding a little bit, so I'm using a straw mulch as just to cover our beds. Mulching helps with like temperature regulation and water retention, helps to prevent erosion. So we got some straw and I mulched all 6 of our beds. Each week I've just been going through and picking 1 or 2 beds to go through, and if some of those straw seeds have germinated in the soil, just pulling those out. So on this side of the garden, I have planted just some garlic that was planted last fall. On the back there is some celery that we started earlier this spring. This middle bed is where I already planted out some onions, and then on the other side, we're still kind of debating on what we're doing. I think we landed on some potatoes. That it's a little late to be doing potatoes, but we're gonna try. So what I've been doing is I'm just pulling up this straw and I'm going through and seeing where any weeds might be. So like these are onion sets. I had tried a combination of sets from Tractor Supply, and then back there are onion seeds that I had started, and I just did both to see which I preferred. So I'm just going through, and obviously these are the onions, and then as I go through and I find any weeds that might have germinated, part of learning for me is knowing, okay, especially when it comes to these seeds, these are onions that I transplanted from seed. This is a weed from the straw. So like if any of this part of the straw germinates, this is what you end up with. So I just grab and pull up the root to make sure I get all of it out. Right here is the bed that we've given to the girls. We have a trellis for them because they do have some cucumbers and some cherry tomatoes that they're going to be doing, and so we just gave them the trellis as an option if they want to use that. On this side of the garden, we plan to have in this first bed peppers and tomatoes and some cucumbers that are going to go up over this arch. And then in the center bed, we're going to have some more tomatoes and I believe some beans that are going to go up over the second arch. And then this third bed is also going to be tomatoes on this side, and then on the other side of the trellis, 2 okra plants. I tried some okra at the farmer's market last summer because I wanted to try it before growing it, and we seem to like it. I don't know if it's going to be like a favorite, so I didn't want to devote too much of the garden to too many plants. So we're starting with 2 to see how that goes. In the center of the garden, we have these towers, which mostly has our leafy greens. Last fall, I had done a lot of, I think all of our lettuce in ground where the girls' garden had been, and I just wanted to see how I like growing in a container versus in ground. And then I also have our herbs over here with some thyme. We have some oregano and parsley. I started some dill from seed, and then more oregano, spinach, and we have some kale down there too. In this tower, we got some strawberries from either Lowe's, Home Depot, or Co-op. We had some last year. We got them too late in the season, and then I did not cover them during some of the really cold, deep freezes, and so we lost them. So we're starting over earlier with some strawberry plants. Down here is just some leftover mint from last year. Mint, as you can tell, it's already getting pretty wild. Basically, mint is a pretty vigorous grower, and so I sort of remembered the pun, because I like puns, that mint wants to be contained. They need containment. Without it, they can kind of take over a garden, so that's part of why I put them in a container, because most of what we're doing in the garden right now could very much be temporary and I don't really know where I'm gonna land with permanent things. So that's why some of like the perennial herbs and things like that, I haven't put them in ground because I'm not 100% sure where I want everything to be forever. That's part of why mint I've kept in a container, and it grows really well. I've done 2 or 3 different types. They make for good teas, and sometimes the girls just eat the leaves just straight off the plant. I'm trying to make this center area a place where obviously you can sit, you can enjoy the garden, and also maybe even fit a larger table in here when needed for like transplanting things out. Also enough room to get a wheelbarrow in here, times that we need to be like transferring these wood chips or anything like that, or any soil. On this side of the garden, this was what we had last year. Our rows were facing the opposite direction. We switched the direction of the rows this year. I had used landscape fabric on pretty much all of it, and I stepped away from that. And initially I wouldn't say totally against landscape fabric, but I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to use that again because it made it really hard for planting. However, it has made it really good for the walkways. I plan on filling in these walkways with wood chips, and it's been great for the fact that we had the landscape fabric was really great for weed suppression on this side. So then fast forward to the fall, where we added these beds, and because it was the fall, the grass wasn't, growing as much. So it was okay for the fall to have these 3 beds and then still have these walkways. I added some cardboard, as you can see, and then some leaves around the edges, and I just never got to these middle 2. And that's where I added the leaves around the edges here as well. And that's just to add some organic material to help with the soil as it breaks down over time, and also helps with weed suppression. But this side never had the landscape fabric. So now that we're in spring, these 2 rows, the grass is just insane. And then same for this center area. Initially I was just gonna do a thick layer of wood chips, but it has to be so thick. It's operating right now just as like a nice little mulch. And then things are still growing through, just like what's gonna happen over here with my straw. My plants are still gonna grow through it, just the mulch is gonna help it retain the water and protect it from those really hot southern summers. So that's kind of what's happening here with the grass. I'm debating whether I'm gonna do the landscape fabric over here or just go straight wood chips. All right, I'm back with a hair tie. Does anybody else always forget that? I can remember my basket, I can remember my hori-hori, I can remember my gloves. But this thing, I never remember, and I always have to go back. And it's warmer now. Still need a sweater, but we're warming up. Something else that I forgot to mention was we tested our soil with some beans to see if it would sprout, because I know over the years, and last year specifically, there have been a lot of issues with like compost and just different soils being contaminated with herbicides. And so I had just gone through in a couple of beds and did like a little trench, and then I had filled it with some potting soil, and I just put some beans in there to see if they would sprout, because they sprout really quickly. You can just quickly see if they shriveled up and died. That would have told me that my soil had been contaminated with some herbicide. And so I wanted to do that before planting out any nightshades like peppers or tomatoes, because those have typically been what has been most affected. And they take a really long time to get to the point from when you start the seed to where it's bearing fruit and you're harvesting. And so I couldn't afford to just put our peppers and our tomatoes in blindly and then find out mid-season that there was contamination in the soil, because then I wouldn't be able to get a harvest. So that's one thing we did this year, just to test our soil before planting. It's time to plant some tomatoes.